Kyle's chair has been empty for 2 years now. No one mentions his name anymore. But I remember that night like it happened yesterday. It's strange how silence can be the loudest thing at a family dinner. Every Sunday night, like clockwork, we sit around the same oak table in my parents' old house in Minneapolis. The same roast chicken, the same mashed potatoes, the same half-hearted jokes from Dad that no one really laughs at. But we pretend anyway. It's all the same. Except for that one damn chair. Kyle's chair. It's still there, right at the end of the table, pushed in neatly like he might show up late. My mom used to set a plate for him, even after he disappeared. That stopped after her stroke. Now we just pretend it was never his to begin with. But I know. And it's all I can think about. Growing up, you'd think Kyle was the golden child. For years younger than me, reckless, charming, and good at making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had this smile, like he knew a secret no one else did. He got away with everything. And I mean everything. Late-night parties, failed classes, even crashing Dad's old Chevy when he was 17. But instead of punishing him, Dad helped him fix the car and took him out for burgers after. Me? I followed the rules. I brought home straight A's, worked 2 jobs through college, stayed in-state for school, so I could help with bills. I was the dependable one. The one no one had to worry about. The one who watched. And slowly I learned that in our house, being good didn't get you loved, it got you ignored. Dad was an old-school man, a retired mechanic who believed in hard work, respect, and not showing weakness. He was never a bad man, just a blind one. He only saw what he wanted to see in Kyle, and somehow I was always in the way. You're just jealous. He once spat at me when I told him Kyle had been stealing from his wallet. If you weren't his brother, I'd have kicked you out for lying. I didn't respond. I just swallowed the lump in my throat and walked out of the room. Mom was the only buffer between us, gentle, quiet, always trying to smooth things over. She had a way of pretending everything was fine, even when the house was burning down. And that Sunday night tradition? That was her idea. A weekly truce. A way to keep the pieces from falling apart. But sometimes love looks a lot like denial. The last time Kyle sat in that chair, he was wearing a borrowed suit, fresh from being fired at yet another job. He smiled through the meal like nothing was wrong, telling jokes to Emma, his 6-year-old daughter, like he hadn't just maxed out 2 credit cards. I remember watching him laugh, and something inside me twisted. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how bad it would get. Because the night Kyle vanished was the night everything changed. And now that chair, his chair, is a monument to everything left unsaid. It started with a phone call. 2 years ago, I got a message from the bank saying my parents' house, our house, was at risk of foreclosure. At first, I thought it was a scam. We never had debt. My dad was paranoid about that sort of thing. But after I called Mom, and she stammered through a half-explanation, I drove straight over. That's when I found the first clue. An envelope tucked under a pile of old mail, addressed to Kyle. Inside was a letter from a credit union I'd never heard of and a copy of a loan agreement, with my dad's name signed at the bottom. Except it wasn't his signature. My heart dropped. I compared it to the check Dad had given me last month for my car insurance. The slant was off. The loops in the Y and G were wrong. And most damning of all, the date on the loan was 3 days after Dad had surgery on his right hand. There was no way he could have held a pen. Kyle had forged Dad's signature. And not just once. Over the next 2 days, I uncovered a full paper trail. 5 different loans. 2 credit lines. 1 refinance using the house as collateral. He'd gambled away our family's future. When I confronted Mom, her eyes filled with tears. "Please, Derek, don't tell your father. It'll kill him." I couldn't believe it. She knew. She knew, and she said nothing. Because in some twisted way, she still believed Kyle could turn things around. She wanted to protect him. Protect all of us from the shame. But that night, I told her I wasn't going to stay quiet. "If Kyle doesn't come clean," I said, "I'm going to the police." Mom begged. She pleaded. She even offered to take out a loan herself to fix it. But I was done watching our family rot from the inside out. I called Kyle. Told him I knew everything. Gave him 48 hours. He never showed. Instead, 3 nights later, I found his room empty. His car gone. A note on his desk that read, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Don't hate me." That was it. But the worst part? Half the documents I'd collected gone. Burned in the fireplace. Only ashes left. Someone had destroyed the evidence. At first, I thought it was Kyle. But the next morning, I found something strange. A matchbox in the kitchen trash, from a diner Mom used to work at in the 80s. One she hadn't visited in decades. That's when it hit me. She burned the files. She protected him again. I stared at the fireplace that morning for a long time. The flames had died, but the damage was done. Not just to the house. To the trust. The truth. Kyle was gone. The proof was gone. And I was left with a family that chose silence over justice. But justice always finds a way, even when it's buried in ash. I didn't hear from Kyle for 2 years. No calls. No emails. No one knew where he went. Not his ex-girlfriend. Not the handful of friends he hadn't already alienated. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. And we let him. After Mom's stroke, everything fell quiet. Dad stopped talking about Kyle completely. It was like he erased him from his memory. But the tension never left the house. It just simmered beneath the surface. Sunday dinners were quieter, more mechanical. And Mom, once the gentle peacemaker, now sat in silence, a slight tremor in her hands, her eyes often drifting toward the empty chair like she was waiting for something that would never come. Then came the heart attack. It was mild, the doctor said. A warning sign more than anything. But to me, it felt like the universe giving my father one last chance to open his eyes. I moved back in temporarily to help around the house while Dad recovered. I took over the Sunday cooking, cleaned out the basement, sorted through years of forgotten boxes and dust-covered memories. That's when I found it, the old steel safe behind a pile of broken appliances. I didn't even know we had one. It was tucked in the back corner, the kind of thing people use to store birth certificates and war medals. The key was taped inside one of Dad's old car manuals. I don't know what made me open it that day, maybe instinct, maybe desperation, but inside, buried beneath a stack of outdated tax returns, were the missing documents. The loan contracts, the forged signatures, everything. And on top of the stack, a note, in Dad's handwriting. If he ever comes back, this is the only way he'll face what he did. I froze. He knew. All along, he'd known what Kyle had done. The betrayal. The lies. And yet, he let me believe I was alone in it. Let Mom take the blame. Let me carry the guilt of tearing the family apart. I confronted him that night. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just placed the stack of papers on the table and said, "You knew." He looked tired, older than I'd ever seen him. "I found out too late," he said quietly. "And I didn't have the heart to ruin what little piece your mother had left." "She burned the first set of documents," I told him. He nodded. "I asked her to. I couldn't. I couldn't let people know I raised a son like that. Not after everything I taught you boys." I stared at him, stunned. "So you chose your pride over the truth?" "No," he whispered. "I chose my pride over you." That hit harder than I expected. He looked down at his plate, untouched. "You were always the strong one, Derek. The one who didn't need defending. I thought you'd understand." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized the real damage wasn't done by Kyle's betrayal. It was done by the silence that followed. By the parents who chose to hide instead of heal. Mom passed away 3 months later. Peacefully, they said. But I wonder if her heart simply couldn't carry the weight anymore. I stood at her grave the day after the funeral, gripping a photo of her and Kyle when he was 5, sitting on her lap in the backyard. She looked so proud, so full of hope. "I'm going to find him, Mom," I whispered. "Not to punish him, but because I'm tired of this hole in our family." And I meant it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted an ending. It took me 4 months and a dozen dead ends to find him. A mechanic in Tucson finally gave me a break. Said there was a guy named Kyle working under the table at a junkyard out in Mesa. Paid in cash. Kept to himself. Had a little girl. When I got there, I wasn't sure what I expected. Kyle looked older. His beard was overgrown. His eyes sunken. His clothes torn at the sleeves. But it was him. Sitting under the hood of a beat-up Chevy, hands stained with grease, humming a song Mom used to sing. He didn't see me until I called his name. He dropped the wrench like it burned him. "Derek?" I nodded. "Yeah." We stood there, the air between us thick with years of silence. Neither of us spoke until a soft voice broke the tension. "Daddy, who's that?" A little girl, about 8, peeked out from behind a rusted truck. Her dark hair pulled into a messy braid. Big brown eyes just like Kyle's. Just like mine. "Emma," he said gently, "this is your Uncle Derek." Her face lit up like sunshine cutting through fog. In that moment, I felt everything I'd buried rise to the surface. Anger, grief, loss, and something else, hope. We spent the evening in a cheap diner. Kyle told me everything. How he ran, how he'd planned to come back, but every day made it harder. How Emma was the only thing keeping him afloat. I thought if I stayed away, you'd all be better off, he said, barely touching his food. I didn't deserve to be part of the family anymore. I leaned in. You don't get to decide that, Kyle. You broke something, but you also have the power to fix it. Or at least try. He looked down, ashamed. Mom's gone, I said quietly. His hands trembled. What? She passed away. 3 months ago. She forgave you. Even at the end. He didn't speak for a long time. Just stared out the window. That Sunday, for the first time in 2 years, his chair wasn't empty. He walked through the front door of our parents' home with Emma in tow. Dad stood up, stiff and uncertain. The room was so quiet you could hear the radiator hum. Kyle stepped forward. But Dad didn't let him finish. He crossed the room, knelt down, and hugged Emma first. I'm glad you're here, sweetheart, he whispered. And then he looked up at Kyle. Eyes wet. Voice cracked. Welcome home, son. No one said sorry. No one needed to. We just sat down. Together. I served Mom's old pot roast recipe. Emma passed the rolls. Kyle carved the meat. And that empty chair? It wasn't empty anymore. Some wounds in families run deep. But karma isn't always about punishment. It's about truth coming to light, and whether we choose to heal or keep hurting. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving love a second chance.